Hello and welcome to the Gameline Wales Online's rugby show, coming to you live on Facebook and on YouTube. I'm your host, Ben James. We're just over half an hour away from kick-off Wales v Georgia, and by the powers of technology, I am joined by our man at the stadium in Parker Scarlets, Matt Southcombe. Matt, how are you finding it from Etley? Got your brolly?
Yeah, well, as I put on Twitter, Wayne Pivac will have had his head in his hands all the way down the M4. The weather's horrendous here tonight. Scarlets fans will be very familiar with the conditions. It's just that drifting, drizzly, horrible rain coming in. A bit of wind out there as well. Not conducive at all to the kind of game that Wales were going to try and play tonight. So we're going to have to see a different side to Wales. They're going to have to take Georgia on probably where they didn't want to, which is up front. So the ball is very much in their court in that regard. Obviously,
this time last week, or actually it was on the Friday, you went live on Facebook talking about what you wanted to see from each of the players. It's a much different team this week, so I guess that question is still relevant. What do we want to see from this new group of players? Let's start with the back three as you take a look at the Parker Scarlets pitch there. So Matt, what do you want to see from the back three, first of all?
Yeah, so if we start with Liam Williams, I think, he's back in his favoured position of fullback. He wants to be in that jersey long term. He's talked about it a lot in the past. Lee Halfpenny sort of wrestled it back from him a little bit when Liam Williams was out with that injury that he picked up in the World Cup. So it's a big chance for him tonight. Again, it's not the conditions he will have wanted, not by a long shot. What he has over Lee Halfpenny is that counter-attacking ability. Halfpenny probably the better defensive fullback, though Liam Williams not too shabby in that department. So really you want to see him bring his point of difference, which is that counter-attacking and running back kicks and finding little gaps in the sort of defence and really getting in behind the Georgians. But as I said, the weather is not really going to help him in trying to do that. I'll just spin you around to show you the Georgians going through their scrimmaging exercises here. As for Johnny McNichol there, we talked about him coming in earlier in the week, Ben, and it just goes to show how much of a favourite, really, I think he is of Wayne Pivac, and as you've touched on many times in the past, how important he can be in trying to play the way that Wayne Pivac wants to get this Wales team going. And that's coming off his wing and picking up the ball and linking up the play. Again, it's not an easy night to do that sort of thing. It's not a night for intricate rugby, so it's going to be very difficult for him to do that. But, if he just comes off his wing and we get the ball in his hands as often as possible from a Welsh point of view, then the ball then is, the onus is on him to really do something with it. And then same goes for Louis Rees-Zammit. Great opportunity for him tonight to finally get that start that everybody wanted him to have, months ago, really. Again, it's all going to be about touches. The more touches he has, the more chance he has to cause carnage. And let's face it, the wingers really have been bystanders for Wales so far in this autumn international series. So it's all about touches for Louis Rees-Zammit. Get the ball in his hands. Give him as many opportunities as you can to do his thing. We all know about his pace. He just needs the opportunity to show it. So you just hope that somehow, despite the weather conditions and despite how bad Wales have been up front, really, so far in this autumn campaign, you hope he gets the chance to show what he can do tonight.
I suppose looking at the weather conditions there, it's going to be a bit of a greasy pitch. We might see a couple of kicks behind, maybe for Louis Rees-Zammit. We've seen him capitalise on a few of those. We've seen Johnny May do something similar for England against Ireland Twickenham today. That could be a tactic Wales employ. Moving on into midfield, we've got Johnny Williams making his Wales debut. Just what a remarkable 18 months that young man has had. You think of everything he's overcome. Testicular cancer, even played a match for England against the Barbarians, an uncapped match, which is why he's available for selection for Wales. And then alongside him, Nick Tompkins, who was the breakout player of the Six Nations, but has found the autumn a little bit harder. It's going to be interesting to see how that pair goes, especially because you make the argument that both midfield spots are definitely up for grabs here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big game for Nick Tompkins, and it seems strange to say it, but I think there's a lot of pressure on him as well. We all were very excited to see how he was going to go alongside Jonathan Davis before this campaign started. Hasn't really gone to plan, has it? There was that shaky performance out in Paris, and then he finds himself out of the squad completely. So I think he's got a lot to prove tonight. Hasn't really hit his strap so far in this autumn campaign. Suddenly there are a few doubters and a few critics out there now as well. But absolutely, particularly that 12 shirt is right up for grabs. And if Nick Tompkins is under a lot of pressure to produce a performance tonight, then I don't think Johnny Williams feels that kind of pressure because it's his debut. Because to many people in Wales, despite the fact he's played quite a bit for the Scarlets in the early part of the season, he'll still be a bit of an unknown entity. So, there'll be excitement to see what he can do tonight. But I don't think he comes in with the same sort of pressure as Nick Tompkins has on his shoulders. And to be honest with you, it might be a night where the ball doesn't really get past Johnny Williams or Nick Tompkins all that much. So, when the ball does get, when the forwards do let the backs have a go, which I don't think will be very often tonight, it's going to be important to see what they can do with it, because I don't think they're going to get a lot of ball. And it's one of those nights where there's not going to be a lot of fluidity in attack, so they're going to have to generate that momentum themselves. And Johnny Williams is going to have to pick up that slack. So, interested in midfield. I think Tompkins under a lot of pressure, as I said, to really produce a performance and remind everyone really of just how good a player he can be. And for Johnny Williams, it's just an opportunity to go out there and really make a name for himself.
I suppose that brings us nicely on to the halfbacks. We got a comment here responding to the question of what we need to see from Wales today. Well, Michael Bowen-Tovey's got quite a lot of things we need to see. Decent ball carrying midfield. I think Johnny Williams will hopefully tick that box. A number 10 that can release our backline potential, and a forward pack that are prepared to dig in and go forward. Now, we'll get onto the forwards in a bit, but Callum Sheedy, it's looking at the pictures from Lechley like it's probably not the night to release a backline, but Callum Sheedy could be that number 10, couldn't he?
He could, yeah. And, just touching on that comment there, you're looking at Johnny Williams to be that ball carrier in midfield, but then we're talking about a 10 unlocking the potential of the backline. Well, it's going to be a tough night to do that, I'm afraid. I think we're going to have to, it's very similar to the conditions that England had against Georgia last week, and Jamie George scored a hat-trick in that match, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. But what I do think this gives us the opportunity to have tonight is to look at a different side to Callum Sheedy. We all know, anyone who's watched him at Bristol playing in good conditions, what he can do on front foot ball when it's dry, with an outstanding backline alongside him. We know his potential when he takes the ball to the line and distributes. We're going to have to see a different side to him tonight. He's going to have to put Wales in the right positions, right parts of the field. It's not going to be the kind of night where you can run it from your own 22 or run it from your 10-metre line. Wales are going to have to be very tactically astute tonight, and they're going to have to do the basics very well. And I think that would be enough to beat Georgia. So, I know there's a desperation to see Wales really unleashed tonight, but I think they need to get the basics right, play in the right parts of the field, and let Georgia make mistakes in the wrong part of the field from their point of view and build from there. So we're going to see a different side to Callum Sheedy tonight, perhaps. Don't get me wrong, if he wants to try and unleash this backline and he can do it, then it will be a phenomenal performance. But I think the smart money here is, particularly in the first half hour, we need to see him putting Wales in the right parts of the field and playing from there. And as for his half-pack partner, Kieran Hardy, Sheedy making his first start, Hardy making his debut for Wales. The good thing about Hardy is he'll know these conditions very well. Obviously, playing for the Scarlets, he'll understand what it's like to play down here on nights like this. He'll understand, what part of the field the opposition will not want to be put in. He'll know the dimensions of the field as well, so he'll be judging his kicks, you'd like to think, pretty perfectly. So he'll be familiar with these conditions, and hopefully that'll help Sheedy along in terms of putting Wales in the right parts of the field.
And I suppose in terms of scrum half play, we've probably seen the blueprint of what a pivot team needs in the last couple of weeks with Lloyd Williams' sort of cameos off the bench. And it probably plays into the sort of scrum half play that's needed tonight. Basically, it's just quick service, clean, efficient play, and a decent box kicking game. That's what Lloyd Williams provided when he came off the bench last week. If Kieran Hardy can do something similar tonight, that's massive for Wales, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the benefits that Lloyd Williams enjoyed when he came on last week is that he came on with the likes of Jake Ball, and Wales started really going forward through Ball when he came on the field, and Elliot Dee came on, and the line out suddenly looked a little bit better as well. So he had a bit more of a platform. But you're right, Ben, in terms of the speed of Ball and the sort of sharpness and whipping it away from the breakdown, getting Wales moving. They really benefited from that and started to look dangerous in that sort of 10-minute period around the 50-minute mark. Obviously wasn't enough to sort of turn the tide, but that was a glimpse, I guess, of what Wales need from the scrum half.
And then moving into the pack, we've got a comment here from Paul Bowen saying that the front five have to step up massively tonight. It's a big test next week, as we can see England have just beaten Ireland as we speak, and we could be seriously embarrassed. I suppose on that note, the front five selected for tonight is arguably, okay, apart from the lack of Alan Wynne-Jones, Seb Davis comes in at number 5, is arguably the best front five we've seen all autumn.
Yeah, I said on the podcast in the week, Ben, it's a better scrummage in front five than the one that played against Ireland. And you know, they're going to have to earn their money tonight, so to speak. You know, we all know that Georgia build their game around their set piece and their scrum. You know, we've seen it go wrong against Georgia in the past in autumn campaigns up front, and it has the potential to completely undermine the entire performance. I think if you look across the front row, Wynne-Jones, as soon as he came on in Dublin, just locked that scrum out, didn't he, on half-time and got Wales out of that horrible little corner there. I know things were a bit of a lottery at the scrum in Dublin, but I think things on the whole were a lot better when he was on the field. So, you know, if he is, you know, we've all said he's the better scrummager in Loosehead. Well, he's got to prove it here tonight. And as for the other side of the scrum, Samson Lee, you know, I thought he was coming into a lot of good form at the end of sort of, you know, when we concluded last season with the derbies. I think he's added a lot to his game in the last 12 months in terms of his dynamism and around the field. But I think tonight is all about a set piece. And, you know, he's been renowned, particularly earlier in his career, for being a scrummager. And again, he's someone who's going to have to prove that tonight. I think a good performance from Samson Lee tonight would probably give Wayne Pivac something to think about before that England game at tight end. You know, Thomas Francis, a very good player there, obviously, for Wales. But I think Samson Lee is a lot closer to that number 3 shirt than a lot of people might think. Same goes for Wynne-Jones, you know, and Elliot Dee for that matter. If the entire front row play well tonight, they could well start against England next week. Moving into the second row, Jake Ball, another one I think Wales will look to next week, particularly if he has a good performance tonight. Like I said, when he came on in Dublin, very difficult to argue that he added a lot to that front five. Suddenly Wales were moving in the right direction, and you know, he's a big man, and as Simon Thomas, our colleague, often says, he hurts people. He hurts people in defence, and he hurts people when he carries the ball. You know, he's a huge bloke, and Wales have missed that grunt. So I think he could really force his way into selection for next week. Seb Davis, you know, you're not ousting Alan Wynne-Jones, are you? And as I've said in the past, you know, earlier in the week, I've not always been the biggest fan of Seb Davis, but I do think he's been fantastic this season for the Cardiff Blues. I prefer him at lock. I look forward to seeing him have a run of games there, and I think it's a big opportunity for him tonight to lay down a mark, and not perhaps for the rest of this campaign, but you know, just to remind everyone, you know, he's a contender moving forward. You know, one for the future certainly. You did worry that he might slip away and slip out of consciousness when they were messing around with him at number 8 and things like that a few years ago. But back in the second row tonight, and again, like I said, an opportunity for him just to remind everyone, you know, he's still around. And he's still a very good rugby player. So, yeah, I think, you know, there's a good chance that 4 of this starting front 5 tonight could start against England if they all play well.
Obviously, because it's Georgia, all the talk is about the scrum and how we match them there. I mean, we got a comment here from a Georgian watcher, Georgie Zakriashvili, saying, you know, talking about the Georgian scrum power, because, you know, Wales hasn't gone too well there. But it's probably as much, if not more, about how the line-out goes, because in the last 2 games, Georgia basically been targeted in the line-out. Scotland did a number on them in the maul. That's how they got all their possession of territory. England, obviously, you mentioned that Jamie George scored a hat-trick of tries from line-out mauls. The Welsh line-out hasn't functioned well, but you'd imagine if they get the arrows right tonight, that more than anything lays the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, we talk about the scrum, but it's only half of the set-piece battle, isn't it? I said Wayne Pivac will have had his head in his hands coming down the M4. Well, you know, the Georgians will have been licking their lips because this is right up their street. It's going to be a forward-orientated game. But yeah, you touched on it there. England clearly saw a weakness in Georgia at the driving line-out. You know, ploughing in the backs into the driving maul, making it a 12, 13-man maul. Be surprised if we don't see Wales go after Georgia there if they get into the right parts of the field. But yeah, you know, the line-up was a huge issue for Wales last week. For all the talk coming from the camp this week that they've sorted it out and that they've worked on it a lot and this and that, ultimately the proof is going to be in the pudding. And I think if anything is going to bring Georgia into the game tonight, then it is going to be Wales making errors. And if Wales continue to make errors at the line-out and errors at the scrum, and suddenly they don't have enough ball and they don't have a platform, suddenly you can start questioning yourself. You can start forcing things. And that's when things can go wrong. So you need to see Wales being really assured at the set piece. And, you know, like I said, I'd be surprised if they haven't looked at what England managed to do to Georgia last week at the line-out. I'd be surprised if we don't see something similar tonight.
And I suppose before we head on to the back row, without going all Derek Brockway on you and Matt, I suppose the pertinent question when it comes to the line-out is, what's the wind blowing like? Obviously, I remember Ryan Elias and the Scottish hook having a very tough time a couple of weeks back. Has a tendency to blow both ways, the wind internationally. So what's it like?
Well, I'm just trying to look to try and find some sort of windsock that I can give you some sort of indication as to what on earth it's doing. I'm just watching the rain blow in under the stand on the far side in front of the floodlights. It doesn't really look to be blowing one way or the other. If I'm forcing it, I would say it's blowing from left to right as you look at it now. So into Wales's faces if they do play from the half where they're warming up. But like you said, you know, a couple of weeks ago when Scotland were here, it was blowing all over the place. So it's got a tendency to do that here, and it's going to be a difficult night for the hookers at the line-out, and you know, and the kickers at goal as well. Of course, you know, it's just as difficult for them. I think Callum Sheedy will probably be kicking tonight, looking at this side, although Liam Williams has done it in the past. But there's no Dan Biggar, no Lee Halfpenny, so a bit more pressure on the shoulder of the kickers as well.
And then I suppose coming on to the final part of the starting 15 is the back row. And again, it's an area of the team where Wales have lacked a bit of balance in the autumn. I mean, when it comes to the breakdown, as Sam Warburton pointed out last night in his Times column, just Wales have been too slow getting there. Well, you'd hope that's not going to be the case tonight because they're employing two open sides, obviously Justin Tipuric, and it's a debut for James Botham.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, James Botham's a phenomenal story, isn't it? You know, 13 professional games for the Cardiff Blues, and suddenly he's making his Wales debut. Now, don't get me wrong, I've watched him a lot so far this season. I've covered the Blues a fair bit, and he's been outstanding. You know, I thought he was more of a sort of 6.5 player. I think he's got the capabilities to do both, but Wayne Pivac sees him as more of a 7, and I think we'll see a bit of left and right from them at the scrum tonight. You would hope that Wales wouldn't be second best at the breakdown, but you know, we talk about Justin Tipuric and the role he plays in the wide channels. I think he needs to make sure that Wales are getting quality ball before he starts appearing in the sort of 15-metre channels and things like that. I think he has to look after the ruck first, and then start thinking about perhaps operating in the wider channels, because you know we need that balance in the back row from a Welsh point of view tonight. You can't all just do the same roles. You know, you need someone doing the dirty work, and I think Jim Botham's going to have to pick up a lot of that slack. Aaron Wainwright as well, of course, at number 8. He's going to have to be involved there. It's an interesting back row from Wales tonight. You know, Wainwright playing at number 8 I know he's played there in the past, but he's obviously been more of a flanker so far in his career. I think his long-term future may actually be at number 8, but Wales are going to have to make sure that they do take care of that breakdown. And it's not just the back row, it's everyone in the pack and in the backs. It's about making sure that you don't get separated from your support players and don't give the Georgians a chance to get in a strong position, because these Georgians are some big boys. And if they get in over the ball, then it's going to be lights out, you're not shifting them. So it's all about everybody being switched on, making sure that they don't get separated from their support runners, they don't get isolated, and it should be okay. Just looks as if the rain is just easing off slightly. I'm not saying it's going to be fantastic conditions, but that might be a bit of a welcome sign. It's still going to be a bit horrible here, but you know, like I said, if they can secure that ruck ball, at least it gives the backs half a chance on what is going to be a difficult night to play some rugby.
I suppose one of the players who deserves a mention on the bench, we've talked about Callum Sheedy making his first start. Well, covering 10 and 15 tonight is Ioan Lloyd on the bench. It could be an interesting one for him, you know, if it's still scrappy late on, if it's close. That's a big call to either bring on a young kid like Ioan Lloyd, either at 10 for Callum Sheedy or replace Liam Williams, the man with 58 of the 63 starts in that backline.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think we're going to see him replace Liam Williams if the game is tight. But, you know, they talk very highly of Johan Lloyd, and rightly so. He's a very highly talented young man. You know, you hear Wayne Pivac talk about him being able to kick off both feet. You know, you hear things like that about a player these days. It gets you excited, doesn't it? A lot of people take that for granted. But there ain't many players in the world who can do that effectively at this level of the game. So, you know, it'll be a big night for him if he comes off the bench. I think Wayne Pivac will want to see a bit of daylight in the score lines before he comes on. But he has promised all the players a chance in this autumn series, and it will be interesting to see how he answers that test if the scores are tight and Johan Lloyd hasn't come on.
So we're 15 minutes away from kickoff then. Just remind me, what was your prediction, Matt?
My prediction was 24-8 to Wales. There
we go. So I think that pretty much answers the Facebook question. What do we need to see from Wales? It's a win like that.
Absolutely, Ben. You know, I think it's on a night like tonight. I think fans are going to have to be happy with a 24-8 win. I know they want to see Wales cut loose and score 30, 40 points, but you know, looking at the sides that have been named and the way the weather is here in Llanelli tonight, I know these are some of the best players. Well, they are the best players this country has to offer, and we should expect a lot from them. But I think if Wales win by a margin, by a score of 24-8 tonight, I think that's got to be chalked up as a decent night at the office.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, it's 15 minutes till kickoff. That gives me and Matt enough time to get ourselves in position for the game. It gives you enough time to get yourself a cup of tea, get the kettle boiling before kickoff, and you can follow all the match on our live blog on Wales Online.